All right, I'd like to welcome you to this edition of In the Conference Room with Mark S. Lee. Of course, I'm your host, Mark S. Lee. And as I do each and every single week, I want to thank all of you for your tremendous support. It's been awesome. Thanks for tuning in. Continue to spread the word. You know, we're posting this on YouTube and other social media channels, and we appreciate all of you. Our goal, our objective is to provide you with conversations with business leaders from across Metro Detroit. And today's show is no different. We have Mr. Stephen Kemp Sr., and he's with Kemp Funeral Home and the cremation services here in Metro Detroit, specifically in Southfield, Michigan, doing some great things with his business. And we're going to spend a few minutes talking about his business and also talk about his family being involved in the business as well. Mr. Kemp, thank you very much for joining me in the conference room. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Same here. Good. Good. Different format, but we're good.
Hey, it is a different format. We'll jump right into the conversation. But you know what? I will say this. I love the technology because it allows us to do things like this and gives us
Right.
a little bit more flexibility as well.
Absolutely.
So, so as we talk about as we talk about funeral homes, for example, in this season, it's my understanding that you're entering the quote busy season, right? The busy time of the year. Talk
Mhm.
about the busy season and why is it the busy season? What's driving the increase in business for you in that regard, if you will?
Well, like any business, you have your ebbs and flows, and death care is no different. In that, over my many years of doing this, I find that the fourth and first quarter every year in the Midwest are typically our busiest, with December and January being the most busy. And we haven't had any scientific data that shows us that, but it's just been said that. And typically, what
Hmm.
I've noticed is the week between Christmas and New Year is the worst, where people are off typically and not working, but deaths seem to go up, especially among senior citizens. Now, I have my own empirical thoughts on why that happened. I think a lot of it has to do
Which
with
is
sadness, loneliness, and things like that. And we all have our industry humor in terms of why things happen in the summertime, but typically summertime is always quiet.
true.
And my theory is people are out, they're happy, the sun is shining, they're walking, they're doing things that they're supposed to do. They're not eating as much, they're not inside fighting with each other, and they're not passing germs among each other. When you're inside and closed in environments, things are a little bit different than if you're outside on a deck or outside period, where you have fresh air and things are flying around. So typically allergies are bad, but the viruses and infectious disease issues go down.
So, looking at the business today, with 3 years over 3 years removed from the very first case of COVID, um, how, how does the business look today? Are you back to pre-pandemic levels? Is it flattened? Has it come down? Have you increased? Just kind of talk about the business model or the business in terms of numbers, so to speak, relative to pre-pandemic days.
Numbers are down, and that's to be expected because of the pandemic. People died prematurely. I hate to say
Hmm.
that. Nobody knows when anybody's going to die. But I think during the pandemic, many people who probably, would have lived past at that time. So all of those have flattened out. And this big thing about baby boomers like you and I, we're reaching retirement ages and after that. And they expect that to increase, but that's kind of leveled out. The most thing that I've seen since COVID is what I call paradigm change, of people's view of the funeral has changed tremendously. Because of the 2 year, 3 year closeout we had during COVID. And, at the height, there were no funerals. Everything was on Zoom. And now that's a common thing to do. People don't travel. They kind of get on Zoom and watch the live stream of the service rather than come talking
Hmm.
personally. I think a lot of the personal contact has been lost. And our business is all about personal contact, whether, weddings, funerals, anything social. And I think that's all gone to some extent, in that younger people, and when I tell people this is their church, this is their
Yep.
everything, this is, they can't have a decent conversation without picking up a phone. So all of those have gone into what we look at as the funeral service or even church.
Hmm.
So visitations have been shorted. People want to do it in one day and get it done. Uh, Cremation has increased tremendously. People didn't, where that's why I say paradigm change. People used to say, "No, I'm not getting cremated," and now that's the majority of business that we do now.
And
Is
why is that? Why is it? What's driving that paradigm shift? Is the cost?
I think primarily a lot of it is cost, but it always has been less expensive to do that. But I think that people kind of got in tune with, well, it's just a body. And when they compare the cost of cremation, when I tell people cremation is about 10% of what it costs to bury somebody.
Mm,
Graves have gone up just ridiculous. Average graves 3,500, 4,000 just for a hole in the ground.
mm,
And people say, you know what? I'm gonna visit that. I'm not gonna visit there that often. And I think that's a waste of money. Whereas with
mm.
cremation, it's like $350. So I always tell people it's about 10% of what you would spend on a burial. And people just say, I don't have the time to drive out to the cemetery where it used to be. I'm not going to go visit. I'm not going to take care of a
Yeah.
grave. And I think now, so I'd rather take a piece of mother and father with me now, and that's you can do that with cremation or cremation jewelry, and or spread her in a favorite place. And I think people come to more of acceptance in our community of disposition.
That's
I always tell
interesting. That's
people
interesting.
disposition is a journey. It's not necessarily a destination. So
Yeah. Yeah. I remember, I'm going to segue to another topic for a second because I remember you and I talked on radio a couple of times, and we talked about the epicenters of the Black community, the churches, the business people, the funeral homes were the epicenter of the Black community, particularly as it relates to the civil rights movement and getting people engaged in the community, getting them involved. Now, here we are in 2023. Do you see that same level of commitment? Let's say, for example, of funeral directors getting involved in the civil rights movement in 2023. Now, however we define civil rights movement today
right.
versus the 1960s, but kind of talk to us about the level of engagement when it comes to civil rights. Are there any examples of what your business is doing? Is it increasing? Is it the same? Just kind of talk to us. How has it changed over the years in terms of that level of engagement when it comes to civil rights and driving the movement?
Well, I've got my own personal opinion of what happened. I don't think that we have. Excuse me. Yeah, I don't think we uh, changed what we do. I think that the emphasis on where we do things now is a little bit different as a business.
Hmm.
In that, where we had civil rights movements in the '60s and '70s, people feel like, quote unquote, they've arrived now. Then we got total integration. We can go to any restaurant we want to go to. And I think that our young people have gotten disengaged from, and everybody. I mean, I think COVID changed a lot of people's things, and businesses now are in survival mode rather than collective responsibility mode. What do I mean by that? I mean that some people, we don't have many African American businesses that are owned by us anymore. And now I think that the ones that are in what we call a survival mode. What does that mean? Does that mean that that people are going? Let me turn this. Uh, I think that people just can't get around. They're just trying to get from day to day, just like we do in our own
Mm-hmm.
personal lives. And
Mm-hmm.
so the biggest part of the community, I think, has kind of gotten lost. You don't see the activism that you see in the NAACP or the Detroit Urban League. And those leaders, there's not kind of an exchange, but that's an old adage, I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
We got to learn to pass the baton and give our younger people an opportunity to grow in that kind of position. And you look at the leaders of all of those organizations, um, are people our age,
Yeah.
and we need to have a group of people coming underneath us who are going to be just they got what I tell people, we got the knowledge and the bruises, they got the energy and the excitement, and we got to combine those two in order for us to make it. In terms of businesses, I still think that we contribute a lot. We contribute a lot to my son's fraternity, my wife's sorority. Certainly, I mean, the women, they haven't missed a beat in terms of supporting one another. But I think for men, and I'm not trying to be sexist here, I see my emphasis has been on young men trying to become productive members of the community, and that I see is our new civil rights these days in terms of getting us involved and getting us equally yoked, so that we're able to compete out here in what I call the new colorblind society. There are no more everything's been stripped away. There's no more affirmative action. There's no more acceptance. There's no more trying to, DEI programs have been eliminated. So you've got to compete out here on a not necessarily equal level playing field. And I think that's where our emphasis, and when we talk about civil rights, I think that's where our emphasis should be, because I see a chiasm between the Black man and the Black woman. In college, higher education, you see women doing a lot better than us. And I don't know why. That one of the things that disturbs me a lot. And I don't know if they have the need for joining fraternities like we did, because it was a collective interest. In college, we had to come together as a group, and that was part of what we did. And young people now, as you said, they want to invent the newest app, and it's all individualism.
That's exactly right.
I gotta, look at me, on social media. Look how, I got a new car and I got this, and really, it's a false narrative of who and whose we are, and that's what I mean by. I think our business, our assets, and what we need to do has to go toward building community again. And I think
but how do we go about doing that? How do we go about in getting our young men engaged in the business? And I heard you say, certainly women certainly continue to grow and making things happen. But so how do we get the young guys, the young men to become engaged in business and talk about what you're doing, and understanding that DEI is being stripped away.
It is.
Affirmative action is gone.
It's gone.
That the playing field is no longer playing like it was years ago. Correct. Is there a lack of understanding? Is there a lack of awareness? I mean, kind of talk to me there.
I think so. We've raised our children to be, and that's the way my parents raised me, to be better than they are. Yeah. And we raised as baby boomers. I think we've arranged, we've done the same thing with our children. And I don't know if it's taken, social media and all these other things have taken it to another level, in that I see us more into this our kids more into this individualism, rather than caring for and helping one another. The least of these, or getting the education so I can become a productive member of the society. But now it's all about me and my exposure and what I look like on social media, or what I am to me, the best apartment, the best this, and the best that. And that really is a false narrative of where we need to go as a people. Yeah. Because if you're not helping other people, if you're in addition to yourself, I don't think life is not going to, what I always say, when God calls you home, he's going to ask you, what did you do for at least for the others? And, we've got to learn how to do this collective work with each other, especially among Black men, because we're losing them. Have been losing them since the 80s, but it's become more of to me, it's more of an epidemic now in terms of, I'm going to give you an example. You go to restaurants. I'm an observer. I'm an old researcher, so I kind of look at things, and I see groups of women, no guys. Yeah. And when you see guys, there's two of them together or something like that. You don't see them in the restaurants and social kind of things, and we're missing in action. There's always seems to be more women than you see men. So it is a difficult thing for me to accept. And, I said, I just tried to give my thoughts to my son, the next generation on what we can give them to be successful in business. And oftentimes, what you see is not realistic.
Mm-hmm.
I don't buy a name brand. I can't afford it. Why would I want to wear it? And I remember one of my mentors way back at elementary school when he talked to us as a black man talking to us, it said if it's on your A double scribble, it's not an asset. And I still learned that from way back in elementary school. Mm. And I remember that word he was telling us that, if it's on your tail, it's not an asset. And, I think we miss, in all this social media, you got to wear carry this kind of purse, to wear these kind of clothes. And that's not helping us build an asset. It's helping us spend more money to look good, supposedly, for a short period of time, but doesn't build wealth. Not rich, wealth. Two different things. And that businesses help you do both if you work hard at it and do what you need to. But I think, that's where we need to get to our kids. I always ask when I used to speak at schools and things, who's the owner of the Pistons? That's my favorite question to ask them. And all of them come up with Joe Dumars or Isaiah Thomas or, one of the players. And then I say, does anybody know who William Davidson is? And you see him going. I said, William Davidson is a small white Jewish man that owns the Pistons. This, he used to own the Pistons. And I said, how do you think he got there? I said, he sits in the stands anywhere. I remember, never forgetting when we was at the Palace out there. He doesn't sit in the front row. He always sat up in the balcony with the regular people. If you remember that.
Yeah,
and I
sure
told
do.
people, if you look at him, you think he was the most unassuming man in the world. And I said, how many people got cars? And everybody raised their hands. I said, how many people look at the glass in your car? I said, look at it. I saw him go home and look at it. It says Guardian on there. And Guardian Industry at that time, made about 90% of the glass in automotives. I said, that's where he built his wealth. That's what often caused him to buy the Pistons and become an owner rather than a player. I said, they're employees, and I'm trying to get that across to them. The other thing I try to get across to young people, and when we talk about collective work, is I tell them about marketing. Everybody wants an Escalade. I said, I don't own a damn Escalade, and it's in my business. I said, there's a Suburban, there's a Yukon, and an Escalade. And I always put 3 on the board. And I said, which one wants what? And everybody, of course, wants the Escalade. I said, do you know they're the same? How many people know they're the same vehicle? And how many people know that people of wealth buy Yukon, they don't buy Escalade? And then I show them the people who buy Escalade. and I said, there's a $40,000 gap between the 3 vehicles, and they're the same car. Yeah. And I said, that's where we get stuck into show and not necessarily assets. And that's what I'm trying to tell people about businesses. And, everybody, but there's no exception, and there's no substitute for hard work and whatever you do. I tell people, do whatever you want to do, but work hard at it. I even talk about how businesses have ebbs and tides, and how our businesses don't last 5 minutes. And then I talk about, they want to know about it. I go to the drug dealers. There was the Chambers, there was the Curry Boys, there was your YBI, but they only
Young Boys Incorporated.
And I said, look at what they did, and think if that was legal, where we would be. But they only last 2 years, 4 years, because it's illegal. But look at how they organize that, and we have the talent to do that. But it don't last 5 minutes, and that's not business. You wanted to go from one generation to the other. And with any business, and learn what an asset is. It's not always on your hand or on your wrist. It's in the bank, or or in some investment somewhere, where it's making money for you rather than you spending it.
Yeah.
For one day.
So that's the whole thing. But you make a couple of good points here. One is this issue I do have with social media is it's another way of saying keeping up with the Joneses. You remember that phrase when we were growing up?
Correct.
And I was talking to somebody not too long ago. Obviously I grew up in the city, you did too. But I
Yes.
remember way back in the day, I'm not gonna obviously call anybody out, but I remember going up one street not too far from my house. And I remember looking at the houses, I say this respectfully. The houses were pillbox sizes.
Correct.
They were small homes, but the cars were bigger than the houses. You remember those days?
No,
And I remember,
it's not. Remember, it's still today. So,
and I remember as a 10-year-old, as a 15-year-old, or whatever. And because I used to catch the bus, I used to catch the Greenfield bus to high school in those days. And I used to say to myself, wow, wow, that house is so small, but that car is bad,
yeah.
right? Where they get the money to buy that vehicle, which in my mind was bigger than the house. And even at that young age, I realized I would say to myself, well, maybe are their priorities slightly different than my
Yeah.
priorities?
Yeah.
You see, I'm going through conversation. I'm not being disrespectful to anyone, but this was back in the 70s, and this was common in parts of Detroit. We can say it, you and I, we can say it. But I couldn't understand in my mind how could a car this beautiful Lincoln Continental be in the driveway, right? And was clean. It was clean. They got it cleaned every day. It was polished, but yet the house was very small. But I
A
can think to
700
myself,
square foot
maybe they're
bungalow.
comfortable in the house.
Yeah. And a house is a much better investment than a car.
But in our mind, it seemed like our minds, we were focused on those materialistic things, to your point, as opposed to the investment things that could truly make us money. Which leads me to my next question, because you touched on the generational wealth. Your wife is involved in the business.
Yes.
Your son is involved in the business.
Yes.
Talk about this concept of generational wealth. I've talked about it a lot. We don't have that same level as a people. We don't have the same level of generational wealth as our counterparts do.
Correct.
And since you have a family business and you have a son that's working in it, your wife is working, talk about the importance of generational wealth. And as you talk about a family business, talk about your son's role in the business today and your wife's role in the business today and how it works for you collectively.
Sure. Absolutely. As usual, let's start with before our son came around. Is my wife
Mhm.
um was worked with her dad who started a metal stamping plant way back in the 70s. And it was an African American owned metal stamping plant that started in Canton, Michigan, and it was Ypsilanti first and then Canton. And she worked with her dad for many, many years till he passed away. And then she became CEO of a stamping company right in the heart of a difficult automotive environment.
Mhm.
And she kind of came in with Dave Bing and all the rest of them, Chuck Woods and some of the people. That's when I met her, and I got to get to know all these people. And these were African American business owners. And she kind of took what I say is from her dad. Her dad was. I always tell her, "You married your dad," but she never agrees because I'm more like laid back like he is. But she's very specific in terms of she was an auditor and public policy person. So she's kind of controls, the finance of everything. And, we wouldn't be where we were if it wasn't for her controlling
Mhm.
and still keep tight reins on the finance because that's her background. My background was science and this. And our son, I never forced him. I found out if you force people to go into the industry, they run away. Uh, and he didn't want to be a scientist like his dad. He wanted to go into business. So he came out and became a financial planner. And I told him, well, you got to learn the first sign is that you got to kill what you eat. And he doesn't know
Yeah.
understand what that means. He says a financial planner like your brother. Um, but he went through all of that and learned. And then one day he just came and said he wanted to, you know, go on to mortuary science. We didn't force him into it. And that was
Mhm.
kind of my wife was winding down, at that business had closed and she was working with two other companies at the time. And we just said, this is a perfect opportunity. I had ideas on, I worked for an acquisition company where we owned a bunch of African American funeral homes. It was African American owned, so I had the background doing that. And I said, I got an idea of what works and what's going to be changed. And we all came together and here we are, 6 years
Yeah,
later, uh,
yeah. That's
and
awesome.
um, blessed that we're doing really, 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 really well. But we're here every day,
Yeah, every day. You're
and I
working your
have to
tails off
tell you,
every day.
right? I have to tell my son, relax a little bit, but
Yeah,
he's. I tell people he's got the illness now, so
yeah,
um, you got to balance this with some life work kind of things, on the other side too. But it's something that if the passion's not in you, you shouldn't do it.
yeah.
And same thing with
Well,
any business. If you don't like what you do, you'll never be successful.
people ask me that question all the time. They say, Mark, you got so much that you're doing that you're. My response to them is very much the same thing. It's the same response. Everything that I do is I have a passion for,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what drives me every day. I can honestly tell you, we were just talking before we started doing this interview today of what my day's been like. But I'm not complaining because God has blessed me, and I worked in corporate for a long time. But everything that I'm doing, Mr. Kemp, Steve, everything I'm doing is I have a passion for it,
Yeah.
and that drives me, and that's why I always have this inner burning desire to do better the next day than I do the day before. And your son sounds like he's doing that as well.
He's doing a good job. Like most
Yeah,
young people, he's still my wife's still teaching him the financial piece of the part. But nonetheless, he's doing really, really well. With our and he, luckily he listens. And he's
yeah,
not, like typical kids. They're gonna do, you got to bump your head,
yeah.
and we all have to do that. I said every day I come and learn to this day. But that's I think that's what we got to do in order to be successful. And he's 32 now. Yeah, Whew, 32. Yeah, he's 32.
Hey, I can relate. I'm not going to go there with the ages of my kids. I can relate to it. Like, wow. But
Right.
before we wrap up, I do want to ask one other question before we wrap up. I know you and your wife are jazz lovers, and
Absolutely.
you have an event, and we talked about that once on the radio show.
Right.
But I got to ask you, you have a major event that's upcoming. Talk to
Right.
us briefly about this event that's upcoming later this month or
So
next month in November.
right. So we're not. I tell people we're not the normal kind of funeral home because I don't. I hate this old sad stuff. We're already sad enough. That's why when you come to our funeral home, you'll see it doesn't look like one. And
Right.
I tell people, it looks like a hotel lobby. And I did that on purpose. Lots of light, no
Mhm.
couches, no spooky stuff. People opening the doors for you, and lots of light coming in place. So we decided to, a year ago, because both my wife and I are big, big jazz lovers. And our at our church, our drummer at our church plays for Kim. He plays for Bob James. He plays for Jonathan Butler, and we were blessed to know him. And of course, our local jazz aficionado, Miss Kimmy Horn, and we decided to do an annual kind of a holiday uh, 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 concert in our facility. So we can invite. Herein, we're talking about community. Invite the community, and what it does a couple things for us and the community. One is it takes away the stigma of the quote unquote funeral home, and two, it's an opportunity for people just to enjoy light and good jazz for an hour. And we sponsor everything. We have hors d'oeuvres and food here inside the funeral home. So I'm trying to take out of the stigma out of it, and that's going to be on November 19th, and it's our second
Okay.
annual jazz concert and our exhibit. My wife says, I'm a frustrated promoter I mean I love it. We go every year to see Brian Culbertson, and I love his business model. But of course, I want to see it for our people because his whole band is black
Right.
and they're tight and very very good and do well. And she says you can't afford to be that kind of person, but and you and I both love Paul Hardcastle, and we love
All
Steve.
our castle. Absolutely.
I've yet to see him in concert. I don't think he goes in concert at all anyway. So
No, I haven't seen him. I would
now
love to
he's
go
from
see him
Great
again.
Britain. We've been listening
Yeah.
to him. And, there was a disco song on. It's funny. My wife was listening to it. I said, "Did you know that was written and played by Paul Hardcastle?"
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, before we, but we're give us the address, the date, the time, the address that and the website where people can go and get
It's
more
on Sunday.
information.
Yeah, it's on Sunday. I forget the time it'll be posted on November 19th. It'll be in the
Hmm.
afternoon. And our address is 24585 Evergreen, right at the Lodge Freeway between 9 and 10 Mile on the north side of Evergreen.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Stephen Kemp from Kemp Funeral Home and Cremation Services. I can talk to you all day, man.
Yeah, I know
We,
it. It
we
is because we always say we're gonna do jazz, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that because I'm a big aficionado. So.
Hey man, I tell you what, I always enjoy talking to you. I know you're busy. I appreciate your time. I'm sensitive to your time. Thank you very much for joining me in the conference room. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
So always a pleasure. So.
Absolutely. For all of you, I thank you all for tuning in to the conference room with Mark S. Lee. And don't forget to subscribe to that YouTube button when you check out this interview. Hit the subscribe button. Continue to subscribe. We have great guests. And before I say have a great day, a great week, I have a special message on this as I sign out, a special commercial for Clean Jobs for Michigan. Stay tuned for this message. And go out, make it a great day, make it a great week. And we will check you out next time in the conversation with Mark S. Lee.
Did you know our legislators in Lansing are working to lower your energy bill?
That's right. Michigan's clean energy legislation could save you $145 a year on your energy bill.
How does that work?
This legislation guarantees that cost savings from wind and solar energy end up in your pocket. Clean energy protects our health, environment, and it'll save you money.
How can people get involved?
Contact your state legislator today.
Let's make our state cleaner, greener, and more prosperous. Paid for by Clean Jobs for Michigan.